What's going on, y'all? This is utxjgthedon, and I think I have a name for this now. The very first interview I did, which you all will see once I end up unveiling this YouTube channel, this new journey that I'm taking. You'll see that. But now I have a name for the second interview. So this is going to be called The Hardest Thing Podcast slash, I guess, just channel where I'm going to talk to the people who inspire me. Now, this has been something I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but I wanted to do it in a different format back in the day. I didn't tell anybody that this is what I wanted to do, but I have been so inspired, especially from the people in our own community, that I was like, you know what? Forget it. Like, let's just dive into it and let me get talking to the people right now. Like, I don't have to be there in person, even though I will in the future. I'm manifesting it. But until then, let's talk to the people now who inspire me, who are people who I look up to. I'm constantly seeing all of the wins that they are getting, and people who I ultimately want to give flowers to. Not the typical people who are just up there, but the people who I know are putting in the work, who I feel like don't get as much recognition in the industry. So tonight I have my good friend Kahlief Adams, Mr. Spawn on Me. What's going on, sir?
What's good, fam? Thank you so much for having me. It is a blessing to be here with you and to hear that you're kind of embarking on this journey. In your content creation journey is super dope because I respect the hell out of you and the work that you do and the rest of GI. So it's a pleasure for me to be here with you and rocking. So that's dope.
Thank you, thank you. And you were definitely one of the people who I would consider a friend in this industry. You definitely give us our flowers often, so I know that if nobody else gives us our flowers and our recognition, I know that you will. Like, I definitely consider you a good friend. So
Thanks.
I was definitely doing my research. I looked at a couple of interviews that you've done with some other people recently. So one that you did actually a couple months ago, and one that you did a year ago. So I don't want to, constantly repeat those things, but this may be a different audience because you're talking to me, you're talking to your boy now. So
Yeah.
so I may rehash a couple of things, but let's get into the beginning of your journey because I know that you always, make the joke that you're an old man, you're an old man. So, you lived a little bit more life than I did. You are of almost the same generation. I'm one step behind you, but we still, we're with the culture. I know some things, that you've done in your lifetime. I'm not that young. I'm not that young, but we get it there. So let's start with the beginning. So you New York, you're from New York, born and
Yeah.
raised. So let's just get into how did you get to Portland? How did you get to the Pacific Northwest? How
Ooh.
because that's a huge jump. You went from literally one side of the country to the other. How did that come about?
Yo, the realist answer to that is my wife is the reason I'm here in Portland. We met back in New York, and we were very much like country mouse, city mouse, right? Like I was born and raised in the Bronx. She was born and raised in Kansas. And it's amazing how the universe works and brings people together who you would have never thought would have come together on this planet, and knowing how many people are on the face of this pebble in space. And we met and we started to date, and she was like, hey, you know one of the things I've always wanted to do is always wanted to move to Portland. And I looked at her and I gave her this look because I was like, yo, there's like 7 black people in Portland. Why are you trying to take me to Portland? And my wife is white, so it's one of those things. I was like, "Yo, do you like coffee and hiking that much that you want to move to Portland and you want to dip out of New York, which is like I still consider one of the most kind of diverse and beautiful places on the planet, even though it smells like pee in the summer. But it's one of those things where it's like when you're in a spot like that, you don't think about any other places because you can get literally anything you want in New York, except for cheap rent. And it's one of those things where I was like, we were living in Brooklyn at that point, and she was like, Portland is the only place that I've known that has felt like Brooklyn, where you get that interaction with people on the street. You can kind of run into a lot of different kinds of people in the space in terms of cultures and lifestyles and different income brackets and that kind of stuff. And I was working in the public school system in New York at the time as a school aide. And I was lucky enough to be able to, you get your summers off, so you can kind of do whatever you want to do in the summer. You still get a check, and it's still dope. So we did a recon trip. We had some friends who were out here, and I went and we did a whole summer out in Portland. And it was funny because the first night that we landed, a couple of our friends picked us up from the airport. We went to go see them. We were like, "Yo, I'm starving." I'm like, "I need some food," and they were like, "Yo, we know this like all night poutine cart that's open. And if you want some poutine, you'll get some food, put some in your belly, you'll be straight." We go to the spot, and I'm looking. We drive up, we roll up, and I see this woman who's like off to the side, and she's chilling, but she's chilling in this very demure, just like standing there with her hands behind her back, chilling, looking like she's just rocking out, hanging out. She's just chilling with her head down like this. And I'm like, yo, is she like gonna turn into a vampire, some ish? Like, I don't know, what the hell's gonna happen with this lady? I don't know what's going on. And this dude walks up behind her and he starts to do these motions with his hands. And I was like, yo, do we gotta jump this dude and beat him up because he might be robbing this lady? And we found out, we kept looking and we were like, all right, we're gonna wait. And they were doing some BDSM stuff in the middle of the street. And I was like, yo, they wilding out, they doing bondage in the street. Yo, this is wild. I think I could live here. I was like, yo, if they doing freaky stuff like this in the street, even though that's not my jam, I can be here. Like, if you're that free and open as a city, then why not try it out and see what it's like? And it's been a fantastic transition. It was actually really, really nice to get out of New York because I really hadn't lived anywhere else ever. I traveled a little bit. And people ask me all the time, like, Kai, do you miss New York? Do you want to go back? I was like, no. I was like, there are things that I miss. I miss, of course, black people and brown people because there are very few here. But like in a cultural sense, there's just like a lack of diversity here in that way. But in terms of like having more space to be able to live and things being a little bit cheaper, like I wouldn't be able to afford a studio in my own house in New York. You know what I mean? We'd be
Right.
asses and elbows trying to get anything done, and it just wouldn't work. So, yeah, that's the kind of abridged version of that story. But it was a good move, and it got me closer to a lot of the video game stuff that I want to do. That's usually on the West Coast anyway. So it wound up being a good move in that way too.
That's dope. That's dope. And I always tell people, and I ended up finding this out myself. And I kind of already knew, but I always tell people, I don't care if you've lived somewhere for your entire life. I think that everybody should at least experience living somewhere else for at least 2 years. Like, you don't
Yeah,
have to be at this, second place for your entire life, but visiting is cool, but that only gives you a little slice of the experience. Like, you're not actually living in a house, you're not in a community, you're not experiencing the day-to-day life of, said city. So visiting is cool, usually in a hotel or something, and you're like doing
yeah,
touristy things, or like you're hanging out with your friends who might live there. But actually living in a different spot will give you a totally different experience on life. And I ended up finding it out firsthand because I lived in St. Louis, Missouri my entire life until I moved down here in Florida. And when I moved down here in Florida, it literally changed my life. That's how I met my wife. So I,
hmm,
I could say that it was all for the better, actually getting the courage to get away from my mom and the rest of the people that were there, and just transitioning to another place. And I get it, it's scary, especially if you don't know anybody, like if you're just moving
yeah,
to a brand new place. And that's probably the main reason why a lot of people just don't move. Like, if I don't have any family or friends there, why am I there? But I still think, like, you ultimately, especially depending on what your goals are in life, like if you end up moving in a place that can provide you with more opportunities, just go ahead and do it. So that's what I definitely recommend to everybody. Like, every single time that somebody asks me, I'm like, just try it. Like, and if you don't like it, move back. But nobody's saying you got to be there forever, but just try it.
yeah. You can like for the most part, if unless you've done like a bunch of crimes, you usually go
Oh,
back
yeah.
and go retry to surface that. And it's dope because you get back into that groove pretty quickly, right? If you've been in a place, you know how it works. Especially if you were born and raised there. Like, I could go back to New York instantly now and vibe out and still get into the same kind of mode that I was in before. But it was scary. It was really scary because I don't have a lot of family. My family and I aren't close. I don't have a lot of friends. So going and moving to a whole other city and a whole other state and a whole other city and state that's extremely white was very, very difficult in the first couple of years. And I was like, man, I don't know if we made the right decision. And then I was like, oh, I can get a yard and I can get a decent sized crib. Okay, I'm all right with this. This is okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, those things will definitely, change your mind a little bit
yeah,
instead
for
of,
sure.
being in a closet because that's what New York is. You
Yo,
literally
no
living in
doubt.
closets. It's crazy. It's crazy. So that's
No
cool.
doubt.
That's cool. I never knew that because I don't think I've ever like got into an in depth talk with you. Like usually
Yeah.
when we interact, it's like playing games and stuff, or like we'll talk about little things in the industry. But that's cool,
Yeah.
like getting that perspective because I've always wondered that. I'm like, how does this man end up in Portland of all places? So that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Of
So,
course.
so when I first met you, I think it was either E3 2015 or 2016. I want to
Yep.
say 15. I think it was our very first year, and you know how black people are. We see each other, you're like, hey, what
Hey.
up, man? Like, I see you
Uh-huh.
doing your thing.
Yeah.
And again, I believe you were with TBH at the time because I know we were doing
Yep.
the whole divide and conquer thing amongst GI. So I think you met up with TBH and we ended up pulling up and meeting up with everybody. And I was like, okay, like this guy seems cool here, but I still didn't really know like what you did exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, later on when I ended up, finding out about you, I was like, okay, like you are doing a podcast. And originally when I started paying attention, I started regularly listening to your podcast. You had three people.
Yep.
And I know that, you typically don't mention one person, but you mentioned, at least, the other person who started it with you. So I've always wondered, like, how did that transition begin? Actually, let's go a little bit before that because I heard that, initially when you started, you were writing articles, like you were actually talking about video games in written form, and that's how you really got your start. So how did you even get from hey, I'm writing articles, I'm kind of doing like amateur journalism to the
Mhm.
podcast with three people? And then how did you transition from three people to I am Kahlief Adams, I am SpawnonMe podcast?
Yeah. Um, it was a long so, I've been doing the show for almost a decade now. Which is wild to say out loud. Like most people don't understand how long I've been doing this, how long you and GI have been doing this, how long we've all been in the game doing this stuff. And we're still fairly young to be able to kind of be like, yo, I did this for a decade and there's still like another half a life to be able to go kind of do more stuff if you want to do it. But I started initially with the Spawn Point blog. And it was a really interesting moment because I was not feeling really smart. And I was at my job. I was doing the IT help desk stuff at a municipal union back in New York. And I would go to work every day and I would feel bad. I'd be like, yo, I am not an idiot. I do have a brain that I can use. I think I'm talented. I don't know what I'm talented in, but I feel like there's a space for me to be able to talk to people or do some of that stuff. People don't really also understand that I'm super introverted. So it's like when I'm doing things on a stage or if I'm, doing a podcast or talking to a whole bunch of folks, they are like, oh, well, Kai's not introverted because look, he's super comfortable doing all that stuff. I've always been comfortable doing those kinds of things once I've gotten more reps because it's been a decade now. But the energy that saps out of you is a little bit different because of folks who are introverted need that kind of time to recharge their battery. We're starting to do that work. We got picked up. I forgot what year it was by the PlayStation blog. PlayStation blog actually reached out to me because I was doing some stories and interviews around players for a game that they had called Sound Shapes. So really dope game. Loved it a bunch. And I was like, oh, if PlayStation, one of the biggest brands on the planet in gaming, wants to collab with me, there must be something here, right? There's got to be something here that's kind of piquing someone's interest. We must be hitting this thing from a reasonable or interesting angle. How do we continue to do that? And then I found out that the angle wasn't that big and nobody really gave a crap. So we wound up cutting the blog down. It was like, nah, we're gonna stop doing it. But right before we finished, I was playing some 2K online, and a cat rolled up in my chat when we were early on Twitch, and his name was Cicero Holmes. Cicero Holmes was like, "Yo, I don't see any other brothers out here doing this kind of stuff. I'd love to write for your site too." And I was like, "Well, cool." We jumped on a phone call. chopped it up for like 2 hours, and I was like, "Yo, you a good cat. Let's figure something out and do something." So that's how Spawn on Me initially was in its kind of infancy with C coming on and doing some work with me there. Interestingly enough, the second person who we wound up bringing on was Sharif Jackson, who I love. He's brilliant. He's fantastic. But we had done a show prior to Spawn on Me and prior to Spawn Point Blog. So Spawn Point Blog was working and doing stuff, and we were doing a thing on Google Plus called Character Select. So it was like 8 of us on a panel talking about video games every week. And it was super disorganized and not well done, and it was Google Plus, so it was like 230p doing some nonsense on there every night, and it was great because it gave me the ability to kind of learn about, oh, I kind of like this, and I was a podcasting fan already. So fast forward, Spawn Point Blog dies. C and I start Spawn on Me. We bring Reef on a little bit later. A couple years later after that, we bring on Tanya to Pass. She leaves. And then we get to this point where it becomes a conversation about what's the future of Spawn on Me going to wind up being. And for the most part, I was the person doing a lot of the work. So it was like producing the show, calling everybody up to get guests, calling the team up to be like, yo, we got to do a show, doing a docket, doing all that kind of stuff. And I got to a point where I was like, well, we got to turn this into a business, because then, we were thinking about doing Patreon, we were thinking about doing other stuff. And I was like, we have to file taxes, and we got to figure out like how to build a business. And when we got to that point, it got really interesting, because the conversations that we had prior to that were more about like, all right, so we crew, we're going to do this, we're going to figure it out. And it continued to be that, but there just wasn't enough energy and drive from the other parts of the team at that point to move to that next phase that we needed to get to kind of continue to move forward, and to be, to be honest, a little bit more on top of what we need to kind of do as a crew and as a team, right? So I remember it was a really crappy day, and where I was like, hey y'all, I want to continue to do this. I know the energy isn't the same. We're not all moving at the same pace. I think we should just kill it. Like, I think we should either kill it, or I should take it and run with it. And at that point, we had like a falling out. We stopped talking to each other for a bit. There was some misalignments in terms of like who was doing what and who thought what and all that kind of stuff. They went to go do stuff with Tanya on the D&D side, and then I just took Spawn on Me and ran with it, and was like, look, it was actually a really profound moment. And I know people hate Gary Vaynerchuk and Gary V, but he had this one post that he put on Instagram one day that spoke directly to me. It was like he was talking to me. And he was like, the day that you find that the people in your crew are not moving in the same direction and they don't have the same energy as you need to let them go. And I was like, oh, I don't know, because those are my dudes. Like, I love C and I love Reef to this day. Like, they are a part of the ethos and a part of the legacy of whatever this is going to be and whatever it has been for the past 10 years. But it doesn't mean that because you love people that you need to work with them. And I wound up coming to that conclusion, and then we wound up splitting ways, and then, Spawn on Me kind of takes an upward turn, continue to do a lot of stuff. I get a little bit bigger in the space, and then things start to kind of roll. And it wound up giving me a lot of confidence that I was like, I'm not crazy. When I'm like, all right, the energy here isn't right, and I have been doing a lot of this work, and I do have a vision for what this can be, and I'm executing on it every week. It's like you get to birth a baby every week. You get to do a project every week that you get to check off in a box and be like, yo, we did that thing. And I was the driving force behind a lot of that stuff. So it was hard. I hated it. I hated the fact that we had to split up. I still think the show would be better with them both here. Like, I fully will believe that, even though we've moved in a really positive direction. I still think that the rapport that we had and the camaraderie and the back and forth is the reason why I love GI stuff so much, is because you have that energy between you all, where that friendship has been built up, and you know who's going to be the naysayer, and TBH is going to delete every game that he plays, and Ethos is gonna come in with the nerdy, super nerdy stuff on the game dev side. Like, there are things in that mix that you have that is beautiful that I miss from the Spawn on Me crew, the original Spawn on Me crew. But I learned a lot, and it was important to kind of make that move for the benefit of me and for the benefit of the show.
This is why I mess with you because I felt like even on our side, we've had a similar situation.
Yeah.
It seems like in your case, you really enjoyed the podcast and you saw Spawn on Me as something that can be higher.
Yeah.
Initially started off as, you may not be making any money, but this is fun for you all to do. And you're like, okay, now let's turn this into a business because I see this being more. And the other people who were your friends again didn't agree with it. They didn't see the vision the same way that you did, and ultimately you were like, okay, I'm going to run with this myself.
Yeah.
And we've had those similar conversations within GI as well. Again, I love all of my guys, but it really came to a point where we decided, as a group, we're going to focus on ourselves individually, and then
Hmm.
we're going to essentially come together like Voltron or the Avengers, and we're going to make it happen because what we were doing just wasn't working. Like we were just still
Yeah.
stuck at the exact same point. So when you're stuck at the exact same point, you got to stop doing the same thing. You got to figure out, all right, what alternative things can we do? Now we all play games together still, but
Yeah.
as you can see, like there are people who don't do, their own individual podcasts anymore. There are people that don't do YouTube anymore. Like streaming may just be the only thing that they do, or they don't stream. They may do music. We have multiple people that just said, forget video games. I'll play them every now and then, but I want to do music. I want to do other things. So those are sacrifices that, we've had to take as a whole, but I had a vision as well. I'm like, I want to focus on the podcast stuff. I want to focus on my own individual brand. TBH said he wanted to focus on his own individual brand. He ended up getting an agent. He got on G4. And so you see how things are changing ethos. He was like, I want to work on my
Yeah.
video game. So all of us decided to like, all right, cool. We're still going to be, this collective unit, but we are going to ultimately just focus on our own individual brands. And then once we get to that upper point that we feel like we're comfortable, then we're going to come back and we're going to make
Yeah.
it happen. So that was super dope. I definitely relate to that fully, your situation. So that's super dope that you ended up sharing that. And like I said,
Yeah.
like I said, we're very similar, man. It's very similar journeys at the end of the day.
I tell people it's like there's a really short amount of time in this space for us. And I don't say that as like, oh, black people, we only have this, but like in terms of your content creation career and the window of opportunity that you have, I'm learning even more about how small that window is to pop off. And like, because it is so small, you have to get like-minded people who share the same energy with you to kind of get, if you're going to do collaborative stuff, you need people who are like going to go, go, go. And I was going hard. I was going, God, people would be like, how many hours do you put? Like, first of all, do you have a team? When we were doing it together. And I was like, yeah, I was like, we're all take pieces of it together. But somebody asked me, they were like, how many hours are you spending on Spawn on Me a week? And I was like, at least another 20 hours a week besides my normal job, my normal 40 hours I was doing at my job. And I've always, for the most part, had a 9 to 5 while I do this. And they were like, yo, where do you find 20 hours from? I was like, yo, I don't sleep.
Mm.
I was like, it's like I don't sleep and I'm driven because this is the first thing I've done well, like in my life. This is the first thing that I've done well and have executed and been like, I have a vision for this and I've figured out a way to make that vision happen. And every, week or two, I get to go back and look at that and like, oh, okay, so this worked well, this didn't work well. How do you kind of maneuver there and how do you figure that stuff out? But for the most part, like I'm building a building every week with another brick of an accomplishment or a thing that got done. And a lot of that is because I'm just pushing and punching forward and
Yeah.
figuring out like how things are going to move. So
Nah, that's
it's
super
that kind of
dope.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the grind is real, and a lot of people don't see, that time and that sacrifice that people have to take. Like you say, you're sacrificing sleep. You literally don't sleep, and you
Yeah.
felt, super passionate about this, and super kudos to you because this was again another thing that I didn't know. While you were doing the Spawn on Me podcast, you had a 9 to 5. You say you did IT, and you say you worked with Intel and Riot, so you always kept a full time job. So keeping a
Yeah.
full time job, like you in day to day, for like some people that I can name off the top of my head, I'm like, how are you all doing this? Like, I find that I don't even have enough time. I have a kid, and I have to devote a lot of time to her, and I'm like, yo, like I cannot find enough time in the day to get this stuff done. But like seeing what you all are doing is definitely an inspiration for me to, get off my ass essentially. And I need to devote a little bit more time to, what I feel passionate about. So like I said,
And,
you all definitely drive me.
and real quick, I think it's always good to hear other people confess that they are working, right? Because it's a thing where I think a lot of people who are like, oh, Ka's successful or Data Davis successful, like they must not be doing a lot of extra stuff. They like focused on that thing.
Mm.
But I have to give props to my wife. My wife financially was the person who was helping to be like, yo, we can use family money to get things off the ground. When I would be like, yo, I gotta fly across country to LA for E3 and I gotta get a hotel for a week. I gotta buy gear. She never looked at me and was like, yo, don't do it and don't spend the money and don't figure like out all that kind of stuff. She was always the person who was like, it took her a couple of months once things started to kind of maneuver, and I got an email. I got an email from a listener who was in Germany, and they were like, "Yo, I never understood the mix between like hip hop and video games and all that kind of stuff. You brought that home for me in a new way." And I gave that to her, and I was like, "Look, this is the impact that is being had when I am telling you I can't have dinner with you, or I'm telling you that I can't spend time with you, and I'm sitting on the kitchen table, and you're like, you're right there, but you can't spend time with me." She was like, I understand now that this is the reason that things are happening. And
Yeah.
it was a profound moment because she's sacrificed a lot too, just being married to me while I try to be a decent husband and not a crap ass. Like, so it's like all of those parts together kind of got everybody to this point, which has been great.
Yeah, it's dope. So you have this support system, and I feel like that's
Hmm.
definitely the driving force that helped you get to where you are today. And I definitely
Yeah.
feel the same way with my wife. I remember it was one point where I was out of my call center job, and I was like, you know what, I want to quit, and she was like, okay. She's like, okay,
Yeah.
I got you. She's like, go ahead and quit. And so I did. And then I did full time content creation for like a year and a half. And then I, went back into the IT world because I needed that security. But still, like the fact that
Yeah.
she, even allowed me to do that and was like, all right, I got us, until you, find out what you want to do, or if this pops off now or later, like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to support you with whatever that you're doing. So it's super dope. Always have a nice lady in your corner that believes in your vision.
Thank you, Sugar Mama. I appreciate you.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So let's
Yeah.
let's get further into Spawn on Me. So
Yeah.
you are very unique in this industry because you are a content creator, but I feel like you did not get popular from showcasing yourself playing video games.
Mm.
You ended up talking to a lot of big people in the industry, and you made it happen, and you focus on underrepresented people in our space.
Mhm.
And you are definitely one of the people who I consider like a driving force in the background, like under the radar. Like, I don't think that people truly know like how many people how many friendships that you have, how many networks that you have in your background based off of like who you've talked to, whether on the podcast or just, at an event, E3, PAX or whatever. So how did that end up coming about? Was that something that you saw yourself doing when you got into this space? Did you see yourself really getting popular, off of not actually showcasing yourself playing video games, but talking about them and talking to, the people that made them or the people that control these games that are coming out?
No. See and it's kind of like I think we're a part of the last generation. I think, with you being a little bit younger than I am, my generation was the last generation to not have the internet and then to kind of usher ourselves into the internet age in that way, in a real way. And we were pre-Twitch, right? We were pre like YouTubers and influencers and streamers and that stuff. So podcasting was like the only real space. And like G4, old G4, Game Trailers TV when Jeff Keighley was doing that, and podcasting, right? And like websites had their own version of content. Like I remember the first time that I saw the One Up show when OneUp.com was a thing. And that was like, almost like real world style, MTV real world style handheld camera, walking around talking to people in the offices about all the stuff that they do in the video game space and why it's important and all those kinds of things that blended into features and reviews and all this other kind of stuff. And I was like, yo, this is one of the dopest things on the planet. How do I do something like this? Because again, like I don't consider myself to be amazingly talented. I don't consider myself to be. I'm not a savant. I'm not like a person who's like. I'm not like, an FGC monster who just like it was like I'm gonna beat everybody's behind in this game and then be the best on the planet and that kind of stuff. I've always kind of eat my way into stuff in a way that was like, well, let me show you that I'm smart and that I care and that I'm thinking about things in a way that a lot of other content creators aren't. And I think that's been my niche. That's been the thing that has kind of kept me in the space. Because I don't like to play video games online. Like I don't like to stream when I play video games because that's a very solitary thing for me. Like I love to play with other people, but like playing and performing at the same time, that to me just doesn't feel good. Like it's not a good feeling for me when that thing is happening. Because I'm quiet when I play. Like when I'm home, like I was like before we started the show today, I was upstairs playing a game and I'm dead quiet. Like that's the way I play, right? I'm not like having running commentary in my mind and being like da 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 da. Hey, such and such, do you want to see this thing? Like that's not the way I think about it. So, but it's cool to see that people have kind of ingrained that and made that a talent that they can do. But it's never been a thing that has really resonated with me in that way. But I remember very specifically a thing that changed my outlook on the video game industry. I remember two things specifically. I remember going to Indiecade East when that was still in New York, and I remember meeting Rami Ismail. He was one of the co-founders of Flambeer, Ridiculous Fishing, Nuclear Throne, all those games, big classic games. Big person in the indie game space now, but he was a youngin in that kind of beginning parts of that space. And I was always a little bit older too. I've started all this stuff when I was like in my late 20s, early 30s, right? So I see him and he's chilling over there. I was like, oh crap, that's Rami. He's a big deal right now. Let me go talk to him because like it's the first event I got my press pass for. And I walked up to him and I was like, hey, how you doing? He was like, yo, what's good? How you doing? Nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you want to know what Steam looks like from the back end? And I was like, what? I was like, you're gonna show me what Steam looks like from the developer standpoint. And it was a small light bulb that went off, and I was like, yo, because I looked at it and it just looks like when you look at your desktop and you open up File Explorer in Windows. And I was like, yo, that's all that Steam is? That's garbage. That just looks like trash. And he was like, yeah, it looks like trash, doesn't it? And it was great because it demystified a lot of the stuff that I had been in that space. Because I was like, video game makers are wizards. Like you're doing stuff that like no one else can do on the planet, right? And you're making all these fantastical worlds and all this kind of stuff happen. But it brought it down to a really like human level, which was dope. And then I went to GDC for the first time, the Game Developers Conference. And I remember being in a room with a developer who's for Media Molecule. And it was the year right before the year the PlayStation Move came out. And this cat was talking about, the PlayStation Move and what wound up being the PSVR at some point, really early on. And I was like, oh, what did you study? Like just talking to him, I was like, what did you study before you decided to get into game stuff? And he was like, oh, rocket science. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, rocket science. He's like, yeah, I was a rocket scientist for a bit. And I was like, no, but now you're making video games and you're one of the people who helped design the PlayStation Move. And I'm talking to you right here. I didn't have to go through security clearance. I had to go through all this stuff. And we're just vibing and talking. And I was like, oh, developers are human beings who have 9-to-5 jobs like I have a 9-to-5 job, but their job is just cooler than my job. And it changed a lot of the conversation for me too in my mind, where I stopped being that person who was online and being like, yo, just fix it. Yo, that can't be hard to fix. Oh, why don't you just make it better? Right. And I was like, oh no, people are spending most of their lives, their early good parts of their lives, making things that we are here to enjoy. That's a profound thing when you think about it. Like nobody goes into the space trying to spend 4 to 5 years as a chunk of their life to go make a garbage game for you to go out and be like, I spent $60. This is trash.
Yeah.
Like most people don't do that, right? I don't know any developers who I've met in the past decade that have been like, that's the thing that gets me up in the morning to spend 5 years of my life to make a whack ass game. Nobody says that. Nobody's trying to do that.
Right.
So it changed the way I thought about video games. It changed the way I thought about the industry, and it made me feel like the work that I can do can be a steward of that space while also talking about us in the space and how we are not just consumers, but how we are makers of the things that are in that space. And to that was the thing that really drove me because I was like, oh man, like we don't just have to be consumers. We just, the three things that you always get told. Oh, you got to be a ball player. You got to be a rapper. You got to be these kinds of things. I was like, no, this is a fourth thing, fifth thing, sixth thing here that we can all be. And there are people who must be doing this work. Why don't we talk to them? So it changed a lot of the ways that I'm just like maneuvering, and it gave me a different level of appreciation for the space, which I think is like the driving force for the content that I do, and the reason why a lot of people don't mess with my content. There's a lot of people who like we should be bigger than what we are. Like I don't get the flowers I deserve. We've done a lot of firsts on our show that people claim that they did the first much later, and I was like, no, we did that first. Like don't try to front because you don't want to acknowledge the work that we did doesn't mean that the work didn't get done.
Yeah.
So like
that's tough. It's tough.
It's hard. It's hard because it's like I know, and I think this is the thing that I think a lot of content creators understand, and this is just the thing that I have for me is like I believe that there's a bar of quality that you should be hitting on everything that you do. And if you don't hit that bar of quality, and again, it's very subjective, right? It's like my version of quality is very different than what somebody else may do. But if you hit that level of quality, I can give you props for that stuff. But a lot of people in the space make nothing. They don't actually add anything to the conversation. They don't actually have quality work, at least in my estimation. And those are some of the biggest names in the game right now. And people will call that hating, but it's like I grew up in a space where you had to like actually do work. You had to be multi-talented, multifaceted. You couldn't just look at a camera, scream into it, and get paid a whole bunch of money. You had to actually do stuff. So I don't know. I come from a little bit of an older school mentality of that way of being like 90% of the content creation stuff that I see out here, I think is trash. I'm like, yo, this stuff is whack. But it gets play.
Yeah.
So
hey, at least you're honest about it. I mean, you have to call out any names or anything, but
nah,
I mean,
like
that's just how it is.
Yeah, it is how it is. I want the space to be better, and I think that the conversation about like when you are black and brown that you have to be twice as good as your peers. You have to be twice as good as some of your peers, but some of your peers also aren't at a high level.
Yeah.
And that high level is, I strive for excellence. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Not with a life that is this short. You know what I mean? So
yeah, understandable. Yeah, a lot of people don't have that mindset, and I think it really comes with growing. Once you get a little bit older and you experience a little bit more of life, I think that definitely gives you a different perspective on like what you did, and like a lot of times, you're living that bachelor life. You're getting a lot of money, you're getting a lot of fame super quick, and you just don't know what to do with it. You don't have a 5-year, 10-year plan. Like there's just no direction. You're just like whatever. Like I'm vibing for the moment because I was able to get viral. But what am I going to do in the future? Am I going to invest? Am I going to give back? Like what am I going to do? And that was something that I felt like I always had in the beginning. Like I always knew what path that I wanted to take. It may have not been what exact content that I wanted to create because, that all changed through my journey. But I knew that, I wanted to get to a point where, hey, I can give back and I want to keep this stuff within the culture. At the end of the day, I feel like that's definitely important to keep that within the culture. And that leads to my next question with you. Why is it so important for you to keep your content within the culture? And make sure that you do, whenever you're talking to people, that you're talking to the underrepresented.
I think that we are an untapped resource in so many different things that we dominate. Like we are the driving force behind every sport except for baseball and hockey and a couple of other things there. we over index both on the entertainment side of entertainment and on the consumer side when it comes to pop culture as a people, right? Like black and brown people are the driving energy force behind all of that stuff. And it winds up changing your attitude about like who do you think your core audience should be when you understand that literally no one in the gaming industry is talking to us. They talk about us, they talk around us, they talk through us. You don't talk to us as a group. And I noticed that what happens is there's two ways to kind of go about it. There's a hearts and minds version of that where you're trying to do the what's the best, like the civil rights movement version of it, right? Which we are still going through and fighting through, but just in a different version of it. And then there's the financial, what do you bring to the table as a block thing, right? And I'm learning the more that, when I'm doing this work of like, how do we talk to ourselves and how do we talk to each other and how do we actually build some inroads within our own community? A lot of that is all about financial stability and financial wealth and financial understanding and acknowledgement and education. And then you can talk to people in a language that they understand. Talk about white folk. We can talk about a conversation that they can understand that then moves the needle for them too, right? Because I don't believe, like, yes, I think in the past, 50 years, there's been more of a understanding that we are human beings who have needs and wants and feelings.
Yeah.
From folks outside of our circles. But there is still a space in which, and I learned this in a moment where my wife and I, we were going on a vacation trip and we were going and hanging out with some of her friends. And we went to this place called Long Beach Island back home in New York. And I remember very specifically going through and I was like, I can see New York from across, I can like see the city from across this body of water. And I was like, yo, I've been here for 3 days and I've not seen one black person. Like none. I've seen no brown people. None. And it's a beach town, right? And I was like, yo, this is a wild thing to kind of like understand. Cause again, like New York is a very diverse city. Even the state is a very diverse state.
Right.
And the thing that dawned on me was like, oh, if white people don't want to be around you, they can choose to not be around you whenever they want. Black and brown people don't have that. That's not a thing that we are afforded.
That's
It's not a thing. It's not a thing that we have, right? You have to literally build things to not exclude people, but to be around people who understand you and to build things around you. But white people can ignore you in a real way. They can section themselves off physically from you, and they can only deal with you when they want to deal with you. That's a profound thing to come back to and be like, all right, so what does that mean? That's a financial decision. That is a cultural decision. That is all of those things that, again, we have some insight on and we have some maneuverability on, but we choose oftentimes to not think about those things in that way, or we clown the businessman who's in the black community because we're like, oh, well, he's probably just going to be that person who's going to clown us and be like, yo, you can't ride with us. That whole conversation about like, would you give Jay-Z, would you have lunch with Jay-Z or get $500,000 or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's a good answer for both, but none of those answers are satisfactory because we don't look at that layer of understanding as being worth as much as, yo, I'm gonna make this album, or yo, I'm gonna make this other joint that has more cultural relevance and more cultural cachet. Then I'm gonna be boring, but I'm gonna have money that I can support my family, my neighborhood, and my industry, right? So I think of all of those things in the fact of why spawnonme is important. I think of all those things when I walk into a room and I'm like, no, I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about all of these people who you continue to look over and not respect their money and respect their dollar and respect their time or the effort or the energy that they bring to your product. Because this is what gaming is. The gaming industry is about product and it's about consumerism and it's about fun. We have fun on lock. Black people, brown people, we got fun on lock. We can make fun out of anything.
Right.
We don't have the financial means because we're still, down bad a little bit when it comes to some of that stuff. But there's a space there where those two things can meet And I want to capitalize on that. I want to pull that into everything that I do. That's the people I want to collaborate with, are the people who can understand that, like, we have power in what we do. We have power in the energy that we bring, and we have power in our collective dollar. And the video game industry has to figure that part out. I was doing a lot of that work when I was at Intel, where I basically, one of the conversations when I had, and I'm sorry, I talk a lot.
Nah, you going in. This is Jill's right here. Go.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but it was like a really dope moment when a lot of conversation around the George Floyd murder happened, and I was working at Intel, and you remember this, the gaming community, especially Black and brown folks, were like, "Yo, nobody sees us, nobody's paying attention, nobody cares about us. They only want to see us now when there's Black pain happening." And I was like, "All right, cool. So let's figure out a way to talk about this in a way that people in the upper suites can talk about and understand." Because they were asking me stuff too about, like, what should we do? Is there anything that we should do here? What's the conversation? I was like, well, look, I want to run a report, because the thing that I never see when I look at Intel, and this is when I was doing that work a year and some change ago, a little bit more than that. I was like, look, I never see us in any of our marketing. I see little blonde white chicks, and I see little scrubby white dudes in all the stuff that I see. I never see Black people in any of the marketing that we do. He's like, well, what would you do to fix that? Because we don't have budget for it. I was like, you're lying. I know we have budget for it. Because I know we're a multi-billion-dollar company. We have money.
Yeah, you can make the budget. Yeah.
100%. You can give me $50,000 and I can make a marketing plan for that, right? So what I did was I was like, look, we're gonna go into the hypothesis mode and say, if you took the Black dollar out of gaming for a year, how much of a dent does that do in our business? Because that's the thing that you have to poke people with. You have to say, all right, cool, I can't get you here, but I can get you here in your wallet, right? And the number is because we don't really track really well, and we don't do a lot of surveys as a unit. And people, we're like, yo, well, I'm not giving you my personal information. Yo, F out of here. So we don't do it. It's like trying to get Black people to do the census. People are like, nah, I ain't doing that joint, right? But I'm like, no, this feeds your neighborhood. And they're like, nah, I don't want to do that joint because you're gonna get you the government. And I'm like, whatever. And the number was around like $12 million a year. I know that number is wrong, because I know the sample size is small, and I know that we as Black people spend more money than that in everything that we do. So I was like, the real number is probably like 6-7 times that. And then if you extrapolate that out across all the other, ethnic groups, that's into the multi-million dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars a year that our company alone is losing. So if you think about that, and then you push that out into the other gaming spaces, that's also billions of dollars that could be lost if we all packed up our money and said, we are not buying a goddamn game for a year. No one buys a game. The biggest boycott of boycotts, right? Multi-billions of dollars. And they said, okay, interesting. We'll give you $60,000 to go do what you want to do. I was like, cool. I was like, dope. So I found a vendor who was POC owned, and I found 6 to 7 influencers and streamers, and I was like, we're gonna give them all PCs to get that part of the pipeline fixed. And that's a part of the like small movement that you can understand from the outside in, or I'm sorry, from the inside out, to be like, there's a problem here. Let's figure out good solutions that will help people move, that'll also then get them to be able to do the stuff that they want to do in their careers. Like, it was so dope to be able to get Ethos a machine, because I was like, we got to get Ethos a machine because he's a developer, right? I was like, yo, we did verticals against game development, social justice, influencers in video games, and one other in artists, because I was like, those are the places that we index. And that's a tangible way to fix a thing using somebody else's money. But it worked. But it came from that George Floyd moment of being like, how do we talk about this in a dollars and cents way that a business can understand? It's not just like, yo, we Black and we downtrodden and you should give to us because society is fucked up and racism is everywhere. Right.
Yeah. And that's very hard, because it shouldn't have to take tragedy. And that's, again, the constant argument that we're making. You already mentioned that it shouldn't take a tragedy for these brands to finally understand that, like, hey, we're here and we can provide the same numbers or even bigger numbers than the people who you're already talking to. It shouldn't have to come to that because we've been here since the beginning. Like, we've been constantly consuming your product. Like, again, like you mentioned, like, we are the number one consumers for a lot of these
Yo,
products. So why are we not getting treated the same? Why are we not getting looked at first a lot of time for a lot of
yes,
these things that honestly, like, again, little Timmy down the block, like, he may not be the perfect fit for it, but again, because he has the numbers and he quote unquote safe, you're gonna go to him first versus me over here. I'm constantly consuming your product. I'm shouting you out. Like, you see that I have a little bit of clout here, but you won't go to me first. So
yeah.
it's a very important fight that we're still fighting, and
We
I don't
brought
know if it's gonna
anime.
end. That
We brought anime to the culture. Think about that. We like in the weirdest way, we gave Japan and China hip hop, and in turn we took anime back
mm,
and made it hot. Like, again, we took another culture, infused it with our own, remixed it, and then now it's one of the biggest things on the planet for everyone,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I don't know. We have to think bigger when it comes to that conversation. There's a very long answer to a very short question, but
Yeah, yeah, facts. It's really just going to take a lot of coming together, which is again another fight in itself. To again, we're kind of like fighting, against each other with the whole group mentality, sheep mentality versus being a free thinker and thinking for yourselves. But I think that a one way to really impact like the entire industry, like, period, doesn't even have to be the video game industry, but music, fashion, you name it, is to come together and be like, look, we're not giving you any of our business until you recognize that we're here and we're the ones consuming whatever product that you are, whatever service that you're giving us. So maybe one day we'll
one
we'll
day.
we'll learn to come together. But yeah, that was a very important question. And I love the answer that you gave. Love the answer. So let me run some rapid fire. And this again, maybe this will be a long-winded answer too. But
Sorry.
who was one of the best guests that you have ever had on Spawn on Me so far?
Sarah Bond was one of my favorite guests. She's head of, I forgot what division now because she's changed a couple of titles since she's been there. Evan Narcisse, Adam Sussler, Sarah Bond, and Austin Walker was some of my favorite guests that we've ever had. Actually, we had a really good one with Colin Moriarty way back in the day. That was actually a
Ah,
really good episode.
ah,
But that was
before.
but there was a flip in the matrix that happened after that. But
Yeah, yeah, weirdness going on, and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. What has been one of the best brands that you've worked with?
Xbox. I mean, honestly, Xbox has been a consistent. They've consistently kind of worked with us in a lot of different ways. Twitch also, like, getting to be on a billboard in Times Square in my hometown was a huge deal. And then Team Liquid was a really fun one because they, apparel wise, they actually have some dope gear, but they since they're so esports, it doesn't make its way into our culture in that same way. But getting a chance to do some of their comic book stuff together was real dope.
Yeah, I really like that collaboration. Like, I,
Yeah, it
I I
was
think
good.
that yeah, definitely underrated. I'm definitely liking, like, just overall, not even with Team Liquid, but a lot of other esports teams when they actually collab with like a super dope brand. It makes some cool stuff. Like, I think that a lot of esports teams are finally getting out of their their hole with, like, it just, if you love this esport team, if you're super diehard, then you're gonna buy their stuff. But making stuff that the average consumer who just thinks that looks cool, but may not know that it's from Team Liquid or TSM, like, they can actually purchase it. So yeah, so that was dope. Like, I remember some of the hoodies that you were wearing. I was like, you know what? Like, if I wasn't in Florida, like, where I
Yeah.
can't wear a hoodie, I can't even wear a lot of the fall things. I'm like, what am I gonna do with a hoodie? Just sit there and just die out the heat. If I walk out there. But if I was still in the Midwest or up north or something, I would cop that hoodie.
No doubt, no doubt, no
Yeah,
doubt.
that's super
I love
dope.
that.
Yeah, that's super dope. So let's get into things outside of gaming. Get into things
Yeah.
outside of gaming. So I know that you're a huge sports fan. I know that you're a huge sports fan. You did a
Yeah.
basketball podcast. You actually did Thursday Night Football with Twitch,
Yep.
and you were doing another football, not NFL related, not
Yeah.
NFL related. So tell me, like, how important is sports in your life, and what's your
Oh
favorite sport that you're just die hard into?
God, I love sports so much because sports is just like that really dope space that tells people like fandom is really interesting in the gaming and the kind of pop culture sense, but like fandom for sports is like generational. Like you're not gonna have like you and your kid. You're like oh, I gotta get my kid a Spider-Man shirt because I like Spider-Man. But you'll get them like, oh, I rep the Knicks, and I'm like, yo, I want you to grow up and be a Knicks fan. Like people would do that kind of stuff.
Mm,
So it's kind of interesting to see how the generational layer of sports comes together. I mean, I'm a big basketball fan. I like tennis a lot. I like curling a lot, which is a weird sport that people don't like for some strange reason. I was like, yo, you getting people on the ice throwing big old boulders of rocks, like these big old polished tea kettles. And it's just wild because it's like if you think about sports in the existential way, and I'm gonna make this a shorter answer, it's a we have decided to make all these games as human beings just from an anthropological perspective of like we make these things that now have rules, and then games are things that multi-million dollars are given to people to learn how to play and are honed over years. And you're just like, who the hell decided that like bouncing a ball, dribbling it, shooting it in a very specific fashion into a circle with a net, if you take 7 steps back, you're like, yo, that's madness, yo.
yeah.
But like that's basketball, and it's wild that that's a thing, right? It's like each one of those has its own thing. So I'm a huge basketball fan. Been a Knicks fan for a very long time in dark ages, which can have continued since most of my life. So much so that I had an ex girlfriend that gave me some Jordans and I never wore them because because I was a Knicks fan. I could have sold them Jordans, man. Them just would have been worth so much money now if I would have
Oh, so
kept
you
them.
were
Joints.
just like, I'm not messing with Jordan at all. Like
Nope, I was
he's
salty
destroyed my team. I'm not
salty,
worried.
yo, salty. I'm a diehard fan. Like I'm very loyal to teams that I rock with. So yeah, that's like sports have always been a part of my life, and I played sports. So I was like little league and some other stuff in that sense. But we did fan control football, which was super cool. So like met those cats through a good friend Jeff Kanata who runs a show called why can't I think of it right now? Wow. I can't think of it. It just ran out of my head. I'll find it in my brain somewhere. DLC is the name of the show, name of the podcast. And met those cats, and they were like, "Yo, we're doing basically like NFL Blitz with real human beings, and you can call the plays live." And I was like, "What?" And then they showed me a concept of it, and they showed me how it would work on Twitch, and I was like, "Yo, I want in. Whatever you can figure out a way to do, get me in." And then a year after they had their first season, they got into the second season. Was like, "Hey, Kyle, we want you to be a part of this, and we're going to do a show on NBC, and we want you to be a part. We want you to host that show on NBC." And I was like, "You're out of your mind." Yeah, I'll do that, Joy. Hell yeah, I'll do that, Joy. So now they're moving over to doing a basketball version of that
Oh,
coming up very soon.
okay.
That they announced some months ago, and I'm like, man, get me in that joint because that's like my wheelhouse. Like, I like football, but football isn't like my wheelhouse. Like, I can speak it, I understand it, I know, what plays are what. But like basketball in a version like that, man, I'm like, yo, I want to do that real bad. Like, I would want to do that in the biggest way. So, fingers crossed for you, boy. If they do some other cool stuff, I want to be a part of that and see how that rolls.
Yeah, that would be interesting because that moves faster than football. Like at least
Mm-hmm.
football, you take 40 seconds to at least come up with the play and then get in formation and then run it. But basketball is even faster than that. So I'm
Yeah.
actually even more curious to see how they're going to implement that. Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see how plays are going to be run and like seeing these players they're like, oh man, we got to
Yeah.
do this instead of like basically improvising on the court.
Yeah.
So okay. So I'll be
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Yeah, hopefully you get in on that because I'm not watching if you'll get it. I'm gonna say that right now. I may
I
take a
think I
peek,
think
but
you'll enjoy it though. I think it like just as a fan of sport, like
uh,
I think you might like it, but that means a lot to hear you say that stuff.
okay. So what is Kahlief like doing outside of gaming? So when you're not playing
So.
games, what does Kahlief do to just sit back, unwind, and relax?
I smoke. No, I'm just playing. Trees. Anyway, I like horror. I'm a big horror fan. Like people don't know that I'm a huge horror fan. Like if there is any form of entertainment that I like more than anything else, not comedies, not plays, not any of that stuff, it is horror movies because I was a horror movie kid when I was very young. I was watching those way earlier than you're supposed to because my uncle was an evil human being who loved me and gave me horror movies. So that's my jam. Like I like really terrible, awful, like debaucherous stuff that people were like, "Yo, you need therapy," and I'm like, "No, that joint is fine." I'll be like, "Yeah," like people are like, "Oh, I want to see a happy movie." I'm like, "No, I want to see a slasher movie and see people get cut up, and that makes me feel better." And people are like, "Yo,
Ah.
you're a weirdo," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know, it's fine." So I like to do that. I like to fish a lot. I haven't fished in a really long time because I just haven't had a chance to. My grandma taught me how to fish, and that's been a thing that I've always kept. And I actually really do like to cook. Now there's been a lot of conversations about
Oh boy.
how I can cook and if I can cook and all that kind of stuff. But I
Yep.
actually really do like to cook. I like to cook. I also make music on the side, which is a fun thing. And not music, but I make beats on my phone and stuff like that because I had a radio show when I was in college and was a beat maker for a little bit, that kind of stuff. I always wanted to do a parody trap album, which would be really fun.
Really?
Just I just want to like all the music that I don't like. I want to make a parody album and then make that joint pop and get a whole bunch of money making a thing that's making fun of the music that people are really really liking. I like to flip things on its head.
Okay.
So yeah, lots of things in my bag of stuff I like to kind of mess around with.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. So what has been the hardest thing so far in your content creation journey? What was just a roadblock for you that you were like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, but you ended up turning the L into a W.
I think, to be fair, like I just never thought that the show was gonna continue to move in the way that it had. Like I just didn't know that people would like the show so much that we would be doing it a decade later. Like
Mm.
it's hard to see the end of a road when you're just like putting down stakes everywhere and like, all right, we're making this track. Hopefully this train is gonna roll on this thing and see if it works. So that's been hard because there's been many times, and I talked to a good friend Parasili from Gamertag Radio about like there was a moment where we both looked at each other and was like, "Yo, I want to quit. I don't want to do this anymore." And he was like, and we looked at each other and were like, "Why do we not want to do this?" Because like, yo, the space isn't fun anymore.
Mm.
Like the energy in the space isn't fun. The way we talk about video games isn't fun. The media in the video game space is crotchety and feels like they just always want to stab people and stab each other. And then you say a thing that's out of pocket or not even out of pocket. It's just not what the group think is. And then you get ethered in all these other ways and people side tweeting you, shading you and all this kind of stuff. I was like, yo, this is boring. Like I didn't get into this for this. Like this is not what I came into this space for. Um, so continuing to find good energy for not only my peers, but for the energy of the space has been the hardest thing. Um, and it's always when I'm about to quit is when something dope happens, which
Mm.
is funny. It's like I don't know if the universe is trying to tell you something. It's like you have a purpose here and you need to continue to go. Like you're not done yet, kind of stuff. But it's always when I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Some great opportunity pops up, or some other thing that's come up will kind of move you in another direction. That's kind of how the fan control football stuff happened, where I was like really down bad on the video game side. I was like, I want to do other stuff because I like other stuff and
Mm.
I could be good at other stuff. And then that opportunity kind of came my way. So just moving down the track, fam, is like just continuing to find good ways to bring good energy and be happy in the work that you're doing. But I've learned a lot about how to not pay attention to other people and like what they think and what they say and have that affect me in a real way. Because at this point, I'm very secure in my understanding, and it's actually like the reason why I love TBH so much is because he is very centered in himself. He has a good understanding of who he is, and he has a good understanding of I will not move into that space because there's nothing there for me. And I've actually learned a lot by watching him move in that way over the past couple of years, and be like, I need to adopt a lot of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's been a lot of that stuff.
Okay. Okay. Final question for you before I let you
Yeah.
go. 5, 10 years down the line, Spawn on Me is still rocking, or you may have found something else that you thoroughly enjoy, and
Yeah.
that ends up popping. What's the end goal for Kahlief? Where does Kahlief see himself?
SpawnonMe will not be here in another 10 years. That's real.
What about the brand though? The brand will still be there, right? Maybe not the
Nah,
podcast. You think you will be done with
it'll
it?
all be dead at that point. Because like 5 years from now, I'll be knocking on 50. And nobody want to see my old ass talking about no video games. Like that's nobody wants that. That's not a thing you want to say. Hey kids, hey everybody, welcome to E3 2044. Whatever that number is. Here's my old ass talking about you want to see Silent Hill. It finally came out. Anyway.
Yes,
that joint finally dropped. Here's Silent Hill. But what I think the thing that has given me the most energy has been the award show. Like the Spawny stuff has been really interesting. Because it's been the first thing in a long time as a project. Because I start a lot of projects and don't finish them. But it's been the first thing that has given me an idea of like, oh, there's another space for us that we can occupy in a cultural way that feels interesting. And I think the first version of the show went really well in a way that I didn't expect it to go as well as it did. And that has changed the direction of what I'm hoping to do in this space. Like I'm lucky enough to work at a studio now where I could foresee a growth pattern and a growth path for me there because I'm a senior community manager there now. But there could be bigger things, and I've made enough inroads and enough connections now that I feel like if this job wasn't the job that I wanted to continue to do, that there will be another one down the line in the gaming space that I could do. But I want to continue to lift us up in every room that I'm in. Continue to make the case for why we are important for the video game space. I want to continue to be a spokesperson for diversity, inclusion, and equity, but not be in the trenches because the trenches suck. But I think you have to be at a certain level to be able to be a decision maker in a way that affects all of us as players and as people of color in those spaces. And that's the stuff that I kind of want to figure out how to do and how to be and be in some of those rooms. Because I feel like we spend a lot of time fighting each other. We spend a lot of time worrying about what the next person has. And we have a really we have really bad tendencies as a community to care about what white people think about us all the time.
Yeah.
A lot. In a way that it's detrimental to our own success. Right?
Yeah.
And that's stuff that I want to kind of remove out of the equation and be like, look, whether that's like, oh, we built our own esports team, or oh, we built our own version of, the amped, house or whatever it may be with some content creators who are a little bit older, right? And we have some more stuff in there. We're not burning each other's beds and throwing chickens in the beds in the middle of the night.
This guy, man.
Right, but it's like those kinds of things are what drive me now. I'm like, there's got to be a space for us to continue to figure out good ways to make content and build stuff. I want a production house. I want to be like the Issa Rae or the Tyler Perry of gaming in that way. Not no Medea stuff, but like I want to build a production house where we can do stuff and make that a thing that is founded on the foundation of gaming. So that would be rad. I think that would be dope. I would love to be able to be one of the first people to be able to say that we did something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe we make the Black G4 and do that in a real way. Right? Like,
yeah,
there's enough people that we know with enough talent, and there's enough people who can see the future for what that potentially could be. We just need money, you need people power, and you need a vision. And I think I have at least two of those things in the pocket, so that would be dope.
Yeah, that's important. I've been saying, and this is another reason why I was inspired to just say, F it, like, let me start talking to the people who, inspired me and that I care about. I feel like right now we are in a black renaissance on social media, YouTube, Twitch, you name it. I am seeing a lot of younger black creators, regardless of whether you like what they're doing or not. I think that they have, actually any talent, but these younger guys are growing at a rapid rate. Like, there are people who resonate with them and are diehard and are loyal. So I feel like if we can channel that and come together, we can really make this thing huge. Because I'm just seeing what individuals are doing. I'm seeing what these younger groups are doing together. Like, when they come together, like RDC World and DreamCon. Look how many people that they brought together They played a freaking dodgeball tournament. They've gotten so many people together and they're all collaborating together. And I'm like, look at those young black men do their thing, regardless of, how you feel about them. They're making an impact on the industry. And I feel like we're in a renaissance right now and we really need to just hone this in, get together and make some dope stuff. Like if we just get a vision and be like, hey, you can do this for another 1 to 2 years, but trust me, you will get burnt out. Like this will get boring. You need to figure out what you want to do for the end game. Like I understand you're still young, but once you figure out what you want to do for the end game and make it happen, I think that we can literally just break the internet. Like we can make this truly happen, but we got to come together and we do have to have a vision. And I mean, they're getting the financial aspect, so they just got to be able to really say, hey, like, all right, this could potentially work and let's make it happen. So maybe one day we can all get together, but this is definitely why I'm just like, all right, like we need to make some things happen now because I think that we can do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, and the last point would be, I think that the beauty of where we are is exactly what you said. I think that renaissance is happening in real time. And I think, regardless of, the way I view some of that stuff, because I think I'm learning a lot that there is a conversation that's always happening. And sometimes it's really important to not poo-poo on people who are doing something that's different than what you do. You have to understand that even if it's not something that you resonate with, that there's an audience that's there that you can still tap into. And if you pay attention to what those vibes are, there's always a nugget of something that is a through line across all of it, right? And I think once you can find that part, then you can adapt to what you need to do. Because I think that's also a part of it too. You've been doing this for a long time. We're constantly reinventing ourselves and trying to figure out good ways to stay relevant or pivot, right?
Yep.
I'm more towards relevancy and pivoting, and instead of trying to like reinvent myself again because I'm just tired. But I think what a lot of people are trying to figure out now is like how to bottle that and then how do you amplify it in a way that moves outside of our circle. The thing that got me really excited about Kai Cenat stuff is more about not what his content does, but how he adapts that content and who does he start to work with now. That's the stuff that I'm really like pat poking in and be like, oh, okay. So now you're the biggest streamer on Twitch in terms of subs. What are the brands that are going to be working with you now? Is that going to be that translation? Are you going to get those Tim the Tatman deals that he got? Are you going to be working with the NFL? Are you going to be working with some of that stuff? Are they going to treat you the same? Because I think that's the conversation piece too that then changes that larger, what are we doing here, or do we have to build our own thing, right? Yeah. So I think that's where we wind up getting in. That was a fantastic point about the Black Renaissance stuff. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll see where this goes, but I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see everything that's been happening, and I'm more excited to see what you end up doing in the future, sir, because this has been a super cool experience knowing you, talking to you, and seeing your journey doing Spawn on Me, solo. Because again, like I remember when you initially did go solo, I was like, wait, what happened? I was like, oh, I was like, I totally didn't know. And then I just see you, just constantly just get bigger and bigger and bigger guests. And you ended up doing, doper things, with your brand, just taking it all, all by yourself. So again, you gave a more in-depth perspective as to what happened. So now I like truly understand how you got to this point. Like you just had a bigger vision and the rest of the people just didn't see it the same way that you did. And, sometimes it's just what you have to do, but it's been working out great for you. And I'm very excited to see, what you end up doing in the future. So it's been dope, man. I appreciate you for, giving me your time. I know it was during the Knicks game. I don't know if they won or lost. I got to check in a second.
I don't know. I'll find out on the back end.
I got to check in a second. But thank you so much for coming on the Hardest Thing podcast / channel / whatever the hell I'm going to do with this. But I want to continue talking to people who inspire me. And this was a very, very good conversation. We definitely had some gems here. So So thank you again. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel whenever I make it go live. I still have some things I have to work on in the background, but by the time you see this, I'll have all that stuff done. So definitely check out my man Kahlief. Please tell everyone where to find you, all your socials.
Right before we do that, I gotta give JG his flowers because I think you're one of the most thoughtful cats in this space. I think I definitely absolutely consider you to be a peer, a friend, a colleague, person I want to do more stuff with, a person I want to collaborate with. Again, a person I want to help move whatever you're doing and the stuff that you and the rest of the crew are doing into whatever space that you feel is necessary and good. So again, thank you so much for giving me some of your time too. I know you got babies and little ones to worry about. So you can find my stuff. Usually we are doing our show Wednesday night, 6 p.m. PST, twitch.tv/spawnonme. You can also find some of the work that we previously did or I did on Peacock TV under the Fan Control Football stuff. So you can go check that stuff out on NBC. We're going to be doing our nomination show. Depending upon when this drops, this will be something that happens towards the end of October. And then our main show is going to be going live in January 2023. We just got some sponsorships from Twitch and from Xbox, so they're going to be sponsoring the show this year for the Spawnies. And yeah, we're going to do some fun stuff. I think it's going to come together hopefully well. If I can get the rest of it done before the end of the year, it'll be a miracle. But again, thank you for the time and thank everybody in the GI audience for rocking, because y'all are some of the dopest cats and some of the dopest community on the planet. So thank you much for having me, fam.
Thank you. And with that, we'll see you all for the next episode. Peace.